webinar time, and let's just start playing the slides for now. Okay, so I've just maximized my slide window and it looks like it's taking 3 or 4 seconds to follow for you. I'm just checking a second machine that I have in the office set up. Anyway, we can start. So Perfect Effects is part of a suite of onOne software programs designed to simplify the way you work your digital images. It's probably true to say that we can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. That's a quaint English saying for people who aren't from the UK. But if you have an image that looks really bad, then it's going to be difficult to make it look fantastic. What we hope is that you take the best possible picture in camera that you can, and then we can make amazing images from that. So by the way, I'm the old guy in the picture making his cup of tea and drinking it. So you can see I'm pretty old. I've been around in this photographic business on and off for a long time and working with software now for almost 30 years, believe it or not, crazy. Our suite, just as an aside, consists of something amazing called Perfect Black and White. It's a brand new program. You must try this program. If you don't have the full suite with Perfect Black and White in, then download a 30-day demo because it does amazing things. For instance, it's got me interested in black and white all over again. Last time I worried about black and white was when I was at university, and that was a long time ago. Now, all of a sudden, I'm interested again. I'll be doing a suite presentation at 2 p.m. UK time, so 3 p.m. European time, and I'll spend a little bit of time inside of Perfect Black and White. Then we have Perfect Portrait, Perfect Layers, which gives you layers inside your favorite RAW-based workflow, Lightroom or Aperture, and also, of course, Perfect Effects 4, Perfect Resize, Perfect Mask, and Focal Point. Perfect Effects is the focus for this particular presentation. So I won't stick on this little slide which talks about the new effects inside of Perfect Photo Suite 7, but I will mention something called the new Perfect Brush. That's a key component of Perfect Effects and Perfect Black and White and Perfect Layers even. But I want to show you how that works first of all so that you'll get the idea when we're using it inside of Perfect Effects. Now a quick note about system size. You need a good computer to run this software. So if you have downloaded Perfect Effects free and you didn't read the technical specification on the website, then be aware that you need a minimum, and this is a bare minimum, of 4 gigabytes of RAM. I'd strongly recommend 8 or more if you can afford more. And if you can't afford more, go shop somewhere like Crucial.com, which is a fantastic place for getting low-cost RAM. So 4 gigabytes minimum. An OpenGL2 video card is crucial as well. You need a minimum of 256 megabytes of VRAM on your card. So VRAM is video RAM, okay? 256 megabytes minimum. The software is Mac and it is Windows. So if you download your free copy, you should be able to install it on 2 machines. I think, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think it should install onto 2 Macs or 2 PCs, but certainly you can download it onto a second PC or download it onto a second Mac. Under Windows, your Perfect Effects free will be running on Windows Vista, Windows 7 and Windows 8, not Windows XP. Windows XP can't keep up with the pace of technological change today, so we've had to drop it. Pity, but that's it. Windows users who are still using XP, you're going to need to upgrade to something newer. Windows 8 sounds good. Windows Vista sounded bad. Windows 7 sounded okay. And on the Mac side, and by the way, I'm using a MacBook Pro this morning myself, doesn't necessarily mean I'm a Mac fan, by the way. Don't worry, Windows users. Mac OS 10.6, Snow Leopard, Mac OS 10.7, Lion, and I'm using Lion on this machine, and Windows users, I don't like it. I just don't think it's a very good operating system. I prefer 10.8, but I haven't installed it yet. That's called Mountain Lion, okay? So that's a little bit about the technical spec. Your Perfect Effects Free is going to work inside of Photoshop CS4, 5 and 6 as a plugin, and I'll show you where to find it in Photoshop. It's going to be a plugin for Photoshop Elements 9, 10 and 11, and it's fully functional inside of Lightroom and Aperture, so your favorite RAW based workflow. And of course it comes with a little free edition of Perfect Layers. So inside of Lightroom and Aperture you can start to work with layered images. Okay, so just a quick note, we do lots of webinars here from the UK office. We also do lots of webinars from the US office. Obviously our webinars are better. I had to say that, didn't I? But normally they're on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 AM, 2 PM, 7 PM, and this is GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. Okay, so hopefully that kind of translates. When you register for a webinar, you can check the time in your own region to make sure that the time is sensible for you. And one very last thing, and it is Merry Christmas, everybody, because it's Christmas soon, and I hope you all have a really good one. Don't get too drunk. I'll try not to this year. Okay, cheers, everybody. So let's start with Keynote. I'm just going to quit my Keynote there, which is a Mac based presentation system, strange and wonderful. And let's dive in very quickly into Photoshop, just to explain where your Perfect Effects Free will sit. Now, I only have Adobe Photoshop CS6, the latest version. It's very dark and mysterious. And the interface has changed a little bit. The icons are pretty similar, as you'll see. What we want to do then is to find our plugins. Just go over to my layers, channels, paths, onOne, click, and a little pull down menu appears, and it's a box filled with onOne software. Focal point for adjusting the depth of field, perfect black and white is obvious. Perfect Effects 4 is sitting in there, okay? So what happens? Where do I find that little box inside of CS6? Well, when you install your application, it will install a little applet under Window, so a little pull down menu there, Extensions, and onOne, and that little onOne box is ticked or checked, okay? Once that's live, then you'll see your Perfect Effects Free sitting inside that little menu. You can pull and shove that around. You can put it anywhere inside of Photoshop. And the alternative place for earlier owners or owners of earlier versions of Photoshop is, of course, File and Automate. And File Automate shows me my plugins. Remember, Perfect Effects in this case is a plugin working inside of Photoshop. It doesn't even use Perfect Layers in Photoshop. Why? Well, you've got layers in Photoshop already, and they're pretty good. They're very sophisticated. So you can use your Photoshop layers in conjunction with your Perfect Effects, okay? So the Perfect Effects I have in the Automate menu here is grey. And the reason for that is I don't have a picture open. So let's just try it. Open an image. I'm going to find something called Possible Images, and I'm going to find a little picture here of a beautiful bus. It's the favorite picture I have of a bus, because for aficionados of buses, and I'm sure there's none on board today watching the webinar, this is a very old bus in Malta, actually in Gozo, little island off the south of Malta, but a beautiful bus. I mean, it's not rotted. It's absolutely perfect. I suppose it's so dry, it just stays looking good. And there's my bus. Now, when I go back to File and Automate, you'll notice all the plugins are black, so they're active and ready to go. And I can access my Perfect Effects from there, or I can access it from the panel on the right-hand side. I'll go into Perfect Effects now and just apply a quick effect to my image. So I've gone into the interface for Perfect Effects. By the way, I don't have to use this through Photoshop. Don't worry. If you don't have a copy of Photoshop CS4, 5 or 6, which are the compatible versions of the big Photoshop, No problem. This whole thing will work standalone as well. And once I've finished manipulating this picture of this bush, it's a bus, I'm going to go back into the suite working in standalone mode, which is the way most of you will use your perfect effects. Now, I'm just going to go into a basic black and white here, and it's a black and white selection called Glow. Now, the pictures on the left-hand side of the screen, of course, are a browser, and the browser is there to enable you to find your effects quickly. At the moment, I'm viewing the browser in single column mode. If I go to the bottom of the browser, there are some little buttons. There are little view changers. So the second picture, or the second little square in with a line down the middle, says 2-column thumbnail view. Click it, and it turns into 2 columns. So actually, I only have 4 of these black and white glow effects, but they're nice. Let's use Casablanca, for instance. Click once on it. A single click applies the effect into your image. And that means if you look over at the effect stack, you have a new layer. It's called a stack in effects because it's a series of different types of effects. And what we're going to do during this presentation is to show you how to create your own presets in your Perfect Effects Free using a variety of different effects, okay? Now, your free version has over 70 different effects. It might be 71, but it's still over 70. 71 or 72. The full version, the version I'm using here, has over 400 different effects, but they will look similar. The way they're laid out is the same. So for instance, I have black and white glow, I have black and white normal, black and white toners, bleach bypass. Click on the little arrow and I get 2 options for bleach bypass. If I want to look at a bleached out version of this bus, I will just go for bleach bypass. Single click applies the effect into my image, and now you'll notice that the top layer above the original image is now called bleach bypass. Let's do that again. Let's call it Omaha Beach. Now this looks like the kind of effect that I think the engineers at onOne software have developed, probably using the film Saving Private Ryan, something like that. So a single click applies the effect into my picture. It's increased the contrast a little bit. It looks just a little bit soft. It's bleached the colors out just a little bit in the image, and now Omaha Beach is the top layer over my original file, okay? If I switch Omaha Beach off by clicking on the little eye icon, I get to see the original picture. And if I want to do a direct comparison of the 2 images, Omaha Beach on this particular picture and the original, then I just go down to the bottom of the screen to where it says after, okay? And I click on that big letter A. And this is a little device that splits the screen into 2. So click, screen splits into 2, and now I can see the original picture of my bus with the bleach bypass called Omaha Beach, okay? So there you see the effect. If I think that the effect is too intense or it's just not as nice as I actually really like the original, by the way. I love the bright orange and the bright yellow, but that's because I like orange and yellow. You'll see that if you ever see me doing a masking webinar, because I always use sunsets in the backgrounds. Anyway, here's my Omaha Beach. Look at the amount slider underneath the effects stack. The amount slider enables you to provide more or less of the effect. Let's pull it down to 50%. Okay. I still have an effect in there. I can see that there's a difference between the 2 buses side by side, but I'm actually quite happy that I can reduce the amount of the effect because I think 100% of the effect is almost too much. What's happening here, of course, is that I'm reducing the opacity of that top Omaha Beach layer. So it's revealing more of the intense color from the original picture. But I quite like that toned down effect. Now, by the way, I can zoom in to this. Notice at the top left-hand corner of the workspace here, I have a little magnifying glass, so I can zoom in and make my image bigger and gradually see the detail in the picture. So I'm zoomed in now towards the Leyland. It's an old British bus company. It's the Leyland logo on the front. Nice chrome logo, actually, beautiful. And so I can use my magnifying glass. I can use my pan tool, which is the hand tool, just to move around, and it gets a mirrored version of the same image in the windows. Okay, so I can actually work in different ways with this. If I click further on the B and the A, the before and the after, I get a split screen version of the picture. So if I just pan that, there's my split screen version. Now you can see on the left hand side of the bus, it's left hand side in fact, it's got the effect on it, and now I can click again and it becomes, well, this is perfect for looking at landscapes. I get a before at the top and an after at the bottom now, okay? And then click again, a single image, or a split image in this case, and then a single image back to where we were. The navigator window works the same way. You can use, instead of using the pan tool, you might want to use the box, the little blue box that's in the navigator window to navigate quickly around your file, okay? But I quite like that effect. Now, let's just go back again to the browser, because at the moment we're showing it in a 2-column mode. I actually have 3 columns here. So if I decide that I have lots of, for instance, antique options, you can see that they are now 3 columns wide, okay? Lots of different options you will have. I have far more volumes in my version of Perfect Effects, the full product, than you have in your free product. But if we go, for instance, to color correction, and this time I apply a darkening of the effects. Whoa, that's an interesting look. That's actually taken away lots of the colour. I need to see that in double column mode so I can actually read what it says. Oh, darken sky. Okay, well that's an interesting effect. If I want to just reduce the amount of that, for instance, what I would do next, and remember, I'm still inside of Photoshop, I would apply the effect back into my Photoshop, my elements, my aperture, my Lightroom. In this case, it's Adobe Photoshop CS6. So with my effect created, go back into Photoshop, continue any image manipulation that you want to do if Photoshop is your preferred choice for editing your images, and for most of us it tends to be. And then I just save the image out when I'm done. But look what's happened in the Layers palette. In the Layers palette now, once I click on that inside of Photoshop, I have my original image and I have my new Perfect Effects layer this time. So it's non-destructive workflow. I've got my original picture, albeit called the background, but there's my Perfect Effects. I'm going to leave Photoshop now, and I'll just quickly dip into Lightroom, because some of you are going to be using your products inside of Lightroom. It's a RAW-based workflow, so all your files are kept in RAW mode as a database, your digital negatives, if you will, and when you work on them, Lightroom or Apple's Aperture. Aperture is an Apple-only, Mac-only program, so a lot of you won't have heard of it. Lightroom obviously is Mac and Windows. Basically, when you open a file in Lightroom and you want to start to edit it, same goes for Aperture, a digital copy, a reproduction is made of the original digital negative. You never work on the raw file, but with a file selected, you can go into Plugin Extras under File, and you will find your Perfect Effects there, alongside, in my case, all the other programs that I use. And then, of course, if you right-click, and by the way, I'm using a mouse this morning, I'm not using a Wacom digitizer, you can say, OK, Edit In. And if we go the next step to say, Edit in Perfect Effects, what happens is a little pop-up appears in the middle of the Lightroom interface asking if I want to edit a copy with any adjustments that I've already made in Lightroom, which is entirely possible. Do I want to edit a copy of the original file without any Lightroom edits at all, or any Lightroom adjustments? Or do I want to edit the original file? So it saves me I can pick the right workflow for me, and I can say, okay, you know, I'll edit a copy, and I just go to edit. It creates a copy, so it takes it away from adjusting the raw file, which I can't actually do, and then I dive back into my perfect effects. Okay, so you've got options. You can work with your perfect effects free inside of Photoshop, inside of Lightroom, or in standalone mode, and that's what we're going to do now, because this is the most common way of working with your perfect effects free. Now, for me working in standalone mode, I'm going to use my onOne suite. For you, you will just have perfect layers, which is the kind of the start point, if you like. It's where you begin with an image, you find your files, and you start to work, and then you go into your perfect effects when you want to create an effect. First of all, let's find some images inside of perfect layers, the starting point for this particular workflow. So, where are my files? I can't see anything. I have a list of applications, library. Well, these are just folders sitting on my desktop. They don't have any pictures in. Where do I find my images? Go to File, and the easiest way to find lots of images in one go is to go to Browse. And when you say Browse, you get a little Browse directory. I'm going to click on Desktop because on this particular machine, all my folders with all my work in are sitting on the desktop already. I haven't got them filed away sensibly like you probably have. Let's just say Choose, and all of the folders on my desktop instantly appear down the left-hand side browser. Okay, so for any of these images, I can access them. So for instance, demo images, they're all in there. I'm still in perfect layers, remember. This is the starting point. We'll go into perfect effects in a minute. And the first thing I want to do for you is just show you a really clever little process inside of perfect layers, first of all. This process exists inside of perfect effects as well, and it's the perfect brush. And this is something I'd like you to get hold of and get in your head and think, oh, this is going to be a really useful tool for retouching images inside of perfect effects and manipulating images inside of perfect effects. Okay, now I'm going to go to a little volume of different types of backgrounds, and the background I'm looking for is in a volume called Walls, and the wall that I'm going to use on this particular image, I'm going to double click to add it in as a layer. Inside of perfect layers I can work with any number of layers, any number of layered components. So with this particular double click, it tells me, hang on a minute, an image is already open. Do you want to add your selected image as a new layer, or do you want to create a new image? Well, I don't want to replace the picture I've already opened. What I want to do is to add the new picture as a new layer. So we're just starting to touch on the idea of layers here. I'm going to go up inside of perfect layers. The tool palette is bigger than it is inside of perfect effects. I'm going to go to the transform tool. I'm going to move over to the top of the workspace on the right hand side and say fill, and it fills that new layer over the first image that I opened. Okay, I just say apply, and if I open up my layers palette, you can now see there are two layers open. The top layer is the wall, or in this case it's a tin wall, it's corrugated iron, let's say, and beneath that is the subject that I want to work on. So I'm going to activate that layer by clicking on it and then move it over the top of the wall. Okay, now let's just go in here and use this magic brush, because what I want to do is to reveal the wall which is sitting behind this picture into the into this particular image. Okay, now this picture, by the way, is a raw file. It's a .cr2. Canon 1DS Mark II was the camera that shot it, and it's a Canon raw file. Okay.